Ever wonder why racism and white privilege really exist? It's not just about hate. It's about identity, or more accurately, the lack of it. See, one of the biggest problems with decolonization is, what do you do with the colonizers? It's a fair question, especially if, like me, you live in a country built on colonization. Because we, the descendants of settlers, are stuck in this strange identity crisis. We've lived here for centuries, but we've never actually belonged to the land we're on. We treat it like a trophy from some conquest that never really happened. We ravage, strip mine, harvest massive tracts of timber, and we pollute this land with barely a second thought. We do that exactly because we never really connected to it. We exploit it because it's only valuable to us as a commodity, for our personal gain. And then there's the purposeful erasure of tens of thousands of years of indigenous history and the harm we've caused the delicate balance of nature and its animals since colonization. It's further clear evidence of that fact. At the same time, colonizers don't have any connection to their ancestral lands either. For example, my ancestors hail from Ireland and Germany, and I know very little about either of those countries. I can't even imitate my genetically native Irish tongue or speak German. I have no connection to Europe. Not culturally, not spiritually, nothing. That thread was cut a long time ago. See, colonialism didn't just erase indigenous connection to the land, it also severed ours to anywhere else. So if we don't belong to the land we live on, and we don't belong to the lands we came from, who are we? That's why colonial identity so often shows up as either overt racism or indignant privilege. Because when your identity is paper thin, you lash out at anyone who challenges it. And I'm sure the comment section of this video will prove that point nicely. But deep down, colonial people want to belong. That's why we obsess over ancestry tests and family trees. We're trying to build a history that was erased to justify our own. Because identity, like culture, is built on history. But colonial countries are continually erasing their history to prop up the justification for colonization in the first place. We delete the history to maintain a fake identity. But no identity can grow because we keep deleting our history. So colonial identity never grows deeper than surface level, or what I like to call the sports and barbecue culture. Our real history is full of horror and hate, which we bury shallow and keep pretending it isn't there. And that open wound is left to fester and poison every generation that follows. But here's the hopeful part. It doesn't have to be that way. Decolonization and land back doesn't mean pack up and leave. They mean show up differently. They mean acknowledging the real history of this land, the pain we've caused, and building a system that values justice over dominance. Because if we do that, if we finally stop hiding from our past, maybe we'll all stop wondering who we are and start building a future where everyone actually belongs. Anyway, something to think about. Peace out. And if you're not already following me, you should. It's going to be a ride.
Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're doing great wherever you're watching us from. So America is going through something deeper than politics, deeper than race, debate, deeper than election. People are starting to ask a question nobody wanted to touch for decades. What exactly is American identity? Because the more people dig into history, the more uncomfortable things become. A country built on colonization, slavery, land theft, religion control and economic exploitation is now facing a generation that refuses to stay silent about it. And now social media is exposing conversation that mainstream media usually avoid. From racism to capitalism to religion in school to the idea that American isn't even one united culture in the first place. This video is making people very uncomfortable online. Anyway guys, let's watch the video together. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and share the video to help the channel out.
I'm just going off the top of my head for a minute. I'm not sure there's any other way out. I've done the math. I'm not sure there's any other way out of this outside of essentially white people destroying each other. Because, like, this country was built on white violence, specifically by white men. And I feel like that's the same way it has to crumble. And I think, like, as we have seen so many non-white communities take a step back, it has really highlighted and illuminated how fucking weak specifically white men are. Because you hear it all the time, right? If you touch my kid, I'll shoot you. If the government tries to take my guns, I'll exercise my Second Amendment rights. If you come for my neighbor, I'm coming for you. Like, all this shit, it just doesn't happen, dude. Like, the only violence that comes out right now is aimed at everybody that isn't white. And a few white people took the heat too, clearly. But I knew that peace shit was out the window, like, years ago. Like, peace rooted in white supremacy, which is just inaction and comfortability, will do nothing to fucking stop what's happening. And I think the reality is white people that do care right now are scared to go toe-to-toe with the white supremacist violence that destroys everything else. Because you see all these white people look around and be like, well, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. And the reality is, like, we have to put some real shit on the line. Yeah, I mean, like, including our bodies and our lives. And what, 96% of white people aren't willing to do that shit? Well, the natural outcome of that is black and brown bodies get stacked up while white people throw a fucking fit over being critiqued over the No Kings protests. The white men that care right now, y'all need to be in the gym or at the range. Me personally, I'm not a fucking pacifist. I never have been. And again, this peace shit, the idea of peace that white people want to hold on to, this idea of basically non-confrontational approaches, literally just doesn't fucking work. So white violence built this country, and the destruction of the white body may make way for something new. I don't know. Just some thoughts. Especially, like, and I'll wrap it up, but especially seeing these white men go after kids at a protest, or go after non-white communities all the fucking time. White men should be out there putting other white men's faces into the fucking concrete for doing any of that shit. That's just my opinion, though. But maybe that's because I'm white, and that's our nature is violence. Who knows?
Let every dirty, lousy tramp arm themselves with a revolver or a knife and lay in wait on the steps of the palaces of the rich, and let us kill them without mercy, and let it be a war of extermination, and let us devastate the avenues where the rich live. Lucy Parsons, 1885. And as always, death to imperialism and its agents, and all power to the people.
So a liberal or a centrist might agree with you that capitalism is destroying the planet, but then they'll look you dead in the eye and say, well, just show me one place in which socialism has ever worked. This is a rhetorical challenge naturalized by 75 years of propaganda. It feels earnest to the people who utter it. And the standard response from Marxists could be better. Often, it's merely to flip the question. Show me one place in which socialism has been allowed to flourish free from attack. I believe a better strategy involves showing why capitalism makes it impossible to know important things, like how socialism is working or not working, and then to give a concrete example, like this one. In September of 1973, Augusto Pinochet was installed as leader of Chile via a CIA-backed military coup. Now, before the coup, Santiago was South America's most concentrated site of radical left intellectual production. There were 5 think tanks in the city that hosted an international network of Marxist economists and sociologists who had an amazing lab at their disposal because they were working in dialogue with Salvador Allende's socialist government. Santiago was a research hub for scholars from North America and Europe, and Latin American scholars shared their findings abroad. They were working on something called dependency theory, which described how wealthy nations developed through colonialism, but then underdeveloped their former colonies through debt, forcing them to send surplus back to the core. Pinochet destroyed this research ecosystem. Research centers were closed within hours of the coup. Researchers were killed, imprisoned, or scattered across Mexico, Europe, and Latin America. He appointed retired military goons as rectors of universities. Troops tear-gassed campuses, violently arrested students, and destroyed lab equipment. Then there's the case of Orlando Letelier, a Marxist economist and diplomat under Allende. After the coup, he fled to Washington, D.C., where he worked in academia until 1976, when agents of Pinochet's secret police killed him in D.C. with a car bomb. This was one of the first foreign state-sponsored terrorist attacks on American territory because a CIA-backed right-wing dictator didn't like this guy's research on the flow of capital in Chile. So if you give an example like this, it still might feel remote to the centrist. But then you can say, capitalists and fascists never want people studying what's happening. Have you heard of all the medical, environmental, and climate scientists Trump has shit-canned? And they might recognize this because many pride themselves on being well-informed. So you can show that capitalists don't want people to know important things. They don't want anyone to know how socialism works, just like they don't want anyone to measure rises in disease or pollution or atmospheric heat. And if you really want to drive the point home and level it up, you can ask, do you know how many journalists the IDF has killed in Gaza? And the answer is, basically all of them.
There is a lie central to American slavery, a lie that the slavers told themselves. There is no doubt that their lifestyles were opulent, that their clothes were the finest, that their wives were adorned in the newest pearls, the flashiest gemstones, that in the summers they could vacation to Europe and travel and see the world, that there is an opulence that appears genuine on the outside, but once you scratch it just a bit, you realize why the South was willing to burn the entire country down to keep their slavery. It's all rotten. It's rust underneath the gilding. But once you take that top layer of paint off, there's nothing in it but a hollow soullessness. And that hollow soullessness is reflected in the way that a planter's wife looks overlong at any slave with lighter skin than his mother and wonders, is my husband the father of that child? It is in the way that the head of the household, supposedly this moral paragon, who spends all his time abusing his female slaves in one way and beating his male slaves in another, that when he leaves the home, he too is paranoid that his wife is finding satisfaction with someone that isn't him. It's fear, rank fear, that the poor whites in the community would one day realize that the reason they are impoverished is that all of the unskilled labor, and by the 1850s, a large portion of the skilled labor, is being done by those who are owned instead of those who are free. That rather than compete with their peers of multiple ethnic backgrounds for jobs and their merit would guide them, instead, that poor white man must understand that his job must be sacrificed on the altar of slavery. And if he figures that out, he might set the system on fire. It is the understanding, persistent above all others, that there is no liquid cash to spend. There is wealth, plentiful wealth, but that wealth is tied up in land, in human bodies, in the manor, in the tools, in the cotton, but not tied up in money. And so the liquid cash, the capital that these planters would spend on their lavish vacations, fine suits, and the best cigars, are taken out on loans, asset-backed loans, where their house is the collateral, where their slaves are the collateral, where their land is the collateral. That if the system changes, or God forbid, the system ends, their wealth and prominence dies with it. And so they concoct lies. First, lies that they tell themselves, that of course that child with lighter skin doesn't look like my husband, even when he does. Of course, my wife, who looks overlong at one of the house servants, doesn't mean anything by that, because she can't. Of course, the white men in my employ love me, respect me, value me, because they must. Of course, the slaves are happy here and wouldn't rip us apart if given the opportunity for all the pain we visited on them, because they must be. And so, when it is Abraham Lincoln who ascends to the presidency, he is the tyrant for the South. He is here to steal your property and take your business and your home, not because he is, but because he must be. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, hit the button so the algorithm brings you back. See you next time.
If you do nothing else today, nothing else today, please, I implore you to listen to this brilliant woman who has my utmost respect. Listen to the whole thing.
Your religion is not special, and you are not special for believing it. Your book has no authority over anyone except yourself. Between this mandatory reading list and the bills passed last year, like SB 965, which would allow a teacher to preach these stories as if they were fact, it is clear that a special level of arrogance is infesting the Texas government. Because it does take a truly special level of self-delusion to think that you are so star-spangled special that your preferred interpretation of your preferred translation of your preferred unsubstantiated, unproven, unfalsifiable claim is correct to the point that you think you have the right to indoctrinate the next generation with it. This is clearly a Christian supremacist agenda, if not evidenced enough by the fact that no other religions are on this list, then by the fact that you've had a parade of Christian supremacists at this podium openly stating that they believe their faith system is superior, supporting this list. This is not providing historical and cultural context, and to act like it is insulting to the intelligence of everyone here, especially considering we're talking about a religion that has done its best to erase history and wipe out other cultures in the places that they've colonized. And in a day when Texas government has removed restrictions on teaching these stories as if they were fact, we had a whole series of Supreme Court cases on teaching your religion's objectively wrong claims as if it were equal to empirically verified facts, and not once could Bible thumpers provide any evidence better than magic. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, not 6,000. Humans are not descended from a dirt man and a rib. There was never a global flood, and a person cannot survive in the belly of a whale for 3 days. I know that some of y'all are desperate to pull fact down to the level of religion by pretending evidence-based science is a religious idea, but like it or not, these are things that we can actually study and test and provide evidence for. Critical thinking, investigation, and the scientific method encourage curiosity and learning, whereas the Christian religion is happy to end any investigation with "except God did it" or "burn for eternity." This dogmatic thinking has led to centuries of hatred, genocide, and support for slavery, and to indoctrinate children into it is a direct harm. Vote against this list.
That is fucking spot on, and what I'm talking about.
So despite what all Americans are told, we were not raised Americans. We were raised inside of one of 10 distinct cultural nations that just happen to share a flag. Here's the map they never showed us in school, and the nations I'm talking about. Number 1, Yankeedom. Founded in the 1620s by English Puritans who came to build a godly society through institutions, which is why Yankees are earnest, civic-minded, and convinced good systems can make people better. Boston, Minneapolis, Milwaukee are examples. Next, we have New Netherland. Founded in 1624 by Dutch merchants who came for no other reason than to trade, not religious reasons, which is why New Yorkers are transactional, tolerant, blunt, and frankly unimpressed by anything that doesn't perform. New York City is that whole nation. Next, we have the Midlands, founded in the 1680s by English Quakers in Philadelphia, which is why Midlanders are friendly, modest, conflict-averse, and suspicious of anyone making a scene. Includes Philadelphia, Indianapolis, Kansas City. Next, we have Tidewater, founded in the early 1600s by English gentry trying to recreate an aristocracy, which is why Tidewater people carry this old money formality about them and this quiet sense that the best days may have been before the Civil War. Richmond, Norfolk, and Annapolis are a part of the Tidewater region. Next, we have Greater Appalachia, founded in the 1710s by Scots-Irish borderlanders, my ancestors, who spent centuries fighting the English, which is why Appalachian people are fiercely independent, loyal to their own, and willing to fight you over a perceived slight that may be decades after the fact. Nashville, Pittsburgh, Knoxville, all included. Next, we have the Deep South, founded in the 1670s by Barbadian planters who built a rigid caste system to run the plantations, which is why Deep South culture runs on hierarchy, charm, and a long memory for who belongs there. Charleston, Atlanta, and Birmingham, all included there. Next up, we have Acadia, founded in the early 1600s by French Catholic farmers. They were violently expelled by the British in 1755 and resettled in the Louisiana Bayou as the Cajuns, which is a shortening of Acadians, which is why Cajun people are joyful, resilient, and unwilling to let business interrupt a good meal. Lafayette and the parishes west of New Orleans are the best example. El Norte, founded in the 1500s by Spanish Catholic settlers, the oldest European culture in America by a full century, which is why Norteños are independent, family-centered, and carry a confidence that doesn't need outside validation. San Antonio, El Paso, Albuquerque, good examples. Next, we have the Far West, founded in the 1800s, not by settlers, but by corporations and the federal government hiring labor to extract resources, which is why Far West people prize self-reliance and carry a chip on their shoulder about being acted upon by distant powers. Denver, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, all part of the Far West, including like Wyoming, Idaho, etc., Boise, Montana, etc. And then finally, you have the left coast, founded in the 1840s by the New England Yankees, who sailed around the continent bringing utopianism with them, which is why left coasters are very idealistic, very earnest, and have zero patience for irony about the values that they practice where they live. San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, main examples. So you have 10 nations, 400 years of settlement. Every American city is running one of these as its cultural operating system. Sometimes two in the case of New Orleans, which is basically Acadia plus Deep South. That's why it can't peak, that's why it can't be replicated. But once you know which nation your city is running in, and which nation you are basically from, everything about the currency of the place you live, everything about how your family thinks politically starts to make a little bit more sense. Whether you're more collectivist, whether you're more libertarian, whether you're a little bit more progressive, whether you're a little bit more conservative. Voting patterns follow these 10 nations as well. And so chop it up in the comments. Hope this was really informative. Let me know where you live. Let me know what nation, quote unquote, you're part of. As always, be civil, be constructive, but I want to hear what you think. All right, peace.
Welcome back, guys. One of the biggest arguments in this entire conversation is the idea that America has an identity crisis nobody wants to admit. The speakers argue that descendants of colonizers were disconnected from their original culture long ago, but never truly developed a deeper connection to the land they occupied either. And according to them, that created what they called a surface level identity. That's why one speaker mocked modern American culture as nothing more than sports, backyard barbecue culture, and patriotism with no deeper historical grounding behind it. Now, whether people agree with that or not, that statement alone triggered a massive reaction online, because for many Americans, patriotism is scared. But critics are now asking, how do we build a strong national identity while avoiding the darker part of history that built the country in the first place? And that's where the conversation starts getting even more intense. Another speaker argues that racism and violence were not accidents in American history, but foundational parts of the system itself. According to that perspective, the economic power of Americans was built through conquest, forced labor, exploitation, and racial hierarchies. And this is why this conversation online are becoming explosive, because younger generations are no longer speaking about racism as just individual bad behavior. They are talking about the system, structure, institution, and historical power. One speaker even claimed that many people who publicly claim to care about justice are unwilling to truly sacrifice anything to challenge those systems. That part especially caused backlash online because the language used was extreme, confrontational, and controversial. But regardless of where people stand politically, one thing is clear. People are now becoming far less afraid to openly criticize the foundations of American society, international politics, and CIA involvement in South America. One segment talked about the assassination of the political economists in Washington, D.C. during the 1970s after researching how wealth and resources moved between powerful and poor nations. The argument being made is that powerful governments and economic elites often suppresses ideas that threaten capitalism or exposes exploitation. That's why one speaker said, capitalism never wants people to study what's happening. Now, obviously, statements like this are highly political and controversial, but online audience are eating this discussion up because people are frustrated with raising inequality, debt, inflation, economic instability. A lot of young people feel like the system simply isn't working for them anymore. One speaker described the Southern economy before the Civil War as hollow and soulless, arguing that much of the wealthy people admired was tied to slavery and debt. According to that perspective, enslaving human beings were treated as financial assets tied to loan and economic speculation. And honestly, when people hear history explained that way, it completely changed how they viewed old Southern wealth and power. A woman stand in front of official and directly challenge what she called Christian supremacist gender in public education, and she does not hold back. She argues that no religion should dominate public schools, says religion belief should not be treated as unquestionable historical authority. That clip alone sparked huge arguments online. Some people praises her for defending separation of church and state. Others accuse her of attacking Christianity itself. And that's right, they are perfectly explain modern American, two sides living in completely different reality. But the final segment may be the most interesting part of the entire video. The idea that American isn't truly one culture. According to the 10 cultural nations theory, North American is divided deeply different regions, identities that were shaped hundreds of years ago by different settlers, religions, economics, and social values. Meaning people from the Deep South, New England, the Midwest, and the West Coast may technically share one flag, but culturally, they often think like completely different nations. And honestly, when you look at modern political division in America, it starts making a lot of sense, because these conflicts are not just about Democrat versus Republican anymore. They are about history, religion, race, economics, regional identity, and competing version of what Americans should be. That's why conversations like this keep exploding online. People are tired of fake, polite discussion. They want raw conversation now. Even if those conversations make people uncomfortable, this video wasn't just about politics. It was really about identity, power, history, and who gets to define America moving forward. And whether people agrees with this speaker or completely reject them, one thing is obvious: the old narrative are being challenged harder than ever before. The question is, will this conversation lead to understanding or make America even more divided? Anyway guys, what do you think about this video? Drop your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and share the video to help the channel out. See you in my next video. For now, peace.